everyone, welcome to this week's Great River Rapport Workshop on Monarch Butterflies. So we are currently here at Christina Enright's home, and she will be presenting on monarchs, the different life stages of monarchs, and how important milkweed is to the species, which is part of our Great River Rapport workshops as part of our land cover and change indicator. So we are here today on her property. We're all set up. This is both an in-person workshop as well as a live stream. And yeah, so here is Christina, and she will take it away. If you have any questions about the workshop, we will be answering them at the end.
Hi, and thanks very much for tuning in about monarch butterflies in Ontario, at least. I often get asked like how I got interested in monarchs, and basically about 4 years ago I had a car accident that injured my right hand, and I ended up having to go off work eventually, and I loved my job and I loved the colleagues, and my physiotherapist said, find something that brings you joy, because you're going to find that you're going to be isolated at home and you're not going to have your friends, like your interaction with people every day, and you might find that it's really easy to spiral down and kind of get really discouraged and everything. So I've always liked to walk, and so the thing that brought me joy at the time was just putting on my running shoes and wandering the country roads all around here. And I learned, I could walk this block this way and it was 11 kilometers, and I could walk this way and it was 5.5 kilometers, and I literally just started spending all my time walking, and it was just me. And I didn't even listen to music or podcasts or anything like that. I just walked, and I started really noticing the nature around me, and before too long I noticed a lot of big fat monarch caterpillars on the milkweed plants that were on the sides of the road, and I was fascinated by them. And about the same time, a friend of mine let me know that she had monarch larvae caterpillars on her milkweed at home, and I said, would you do me a favor? Can you just loan me two? I actually said loan me one, but then I felt bad for the one that was going to be separated from the herd, and so I said, could I have two? And she said, well, what are you going to do with them? And I said, I promise you that I will take really good care of them, but I'm home alone a lot of the time, and I'm fascinated by them, and I think it'd be really cool to watch them go through their cycle. And they weren't huge ones, they were mid-size. So the caterpillars are aged according to instar. So when they first hatch out of the egg, they're a first instar. At about 3 days, they shed their skin, they molt, and they then become a second instar. And about 7 days, they molt again, and they become a third instar. And then, honestly, the last molt takes place quite a long time before they grow to the big fat size. But the last molt gives them all of that extra skin space to grow inside of. And so when I got them, they were like third instars. They were just little guys. But I got an aquarium, and I put a netting lid on the top with an elastic band, and I had fresh milkweed every day. I never accounted for how much they poop, because it occurred to me very quickly that I had milkweed in this aquarium, and there was no easy way to get it out without disturbing them, but the bottom of the globe aquarium was very quickly filling up. So just a note to self, if you're gonna toy with raising monarch butterflies from caterpillars, they poop all the time. Anyway, I was fascinated, and I got to see them shed their skin, which is called when they pupate and become the chrysalis. And then I got to see them actually emerge as butterflies, and I was spellbound, and I've been hooked ever since. That was about 5 years ago, or I guess 4 years ago, and literally I have been learning everything I can about them and trying to help them in every way that I can. And I have to say I'm fortunate because I have a really tolerant husband who understands my passion and supports me in it. I mean, this is a former dairy farmer who cannot believe that we literally grow milkweed here, because if you know anything about farming, milkweed is it used to be on the noxious weed list. I recently heard that it was taken off, but I can't actually verify that yet. But it's toxic to any species with a vertebra. And so, for people, it could cause us to become very ill. For cattle, it can kill them, and literally, it has cardiac enzymes or something in the milkweed leaf in the milk, and that is what is so dangerous to people. Basically, you'll have heart issues and potentially a heart attack. And I know that a lot of people are down on farmers for spraying their crops, and I want to say right up front that there is a need for farmers to spray, and they have every right to produce the best crop that they can for their cattle, for whatever livestock they're raising. It's not just a question of them becoming ill, but if you end up baling hay that has milkweed in it, it's very possible that when you feed that hay in the winter, your cattle are going to back away from it, and there goes all your work down the drain, because you can no longer feed this hay to cattle that certainly won't want to eat it, knowing that there's milkweed there. And so I have a great relationship with our neighbors. We have dairy farmers all around us, and we have an agreement that they give me permission to enter their fields and to dig up any milkweed that I find and transplant it into my raised garden bed here, on the condition that I don't let it go to seed, because they can spray corn, they can spray soybeans, but you can't spray hay. And so that's one of the reasons they rotate crops, is that they'll put corn in one year, spray it, and then the next year it'll be hay, and hopefully you won't have milkweed in it. But at the end of the day, there's a legitimate requirement for them to spray to eliminate noxious weeds, and I respect that wholeheartedly. Having said that, in our area, our county has a program whereby our roadsides are cut 3 times a year. They're cut in June, 4 feet, and they're cut at the end of July, beginning of August, a 10 to 12 foot cut. And this year it's actually going further than that because of our problem with wild parsnip. And then they cut again in September, another 4 foot cut. And there is a legitimate need to do that. A lot of our roads have high speeds, and all it takes is a raccoon or something darting out of the long grass, and you swerve, and next thing you know, there's a head-on collision, and there are fatalities, and there's absolutely a need for that. At the same time, monarchs are protected in Ontario. Milkweed is the only food that the caterpillars can eat. For that reason, the butterflies lay the eggs on the milkweed leaves, so that when the caterpillar hatches, it's directly on its food source.
For volume.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, if you want to, you can, since we're all wearing it,
Yeah.
It's okay if you take that off so people can hear everyone.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's way better. Thank you. So what I was saying earlier is milkweed, I have it growing in my garden over here. It takes a long time to actually become established. These are from seeds that I planted 3 years ago. They finally came up this year, and they're good and they're hardy, and they spread, obviously. One of the reasons why they're a weed that people don't always like. But if you don't have milkweed, you're not going to have monarch butterflies. That's just the way it is. And it took them years and years to evolve to the eons, thousands of years to evolve to the point where the larva can eat the milkweed and not be negatively impacted by the toxic milk in the leaves. And they have specific chemicals and enzymes in their makeup that allow them to be able to consume milkweed and have it not kill them. And so, the thought of, well, maybe they'll just eat something else. Well, it took them however long to get to the point where they can consume milkweed without any ill effects. It's probably going to take more than all of our lifetimes put together for them to evolve to a point where they can consume something else. So I'm really passionate about people growing milkweed in their personal spaces, in their gardens. If you don't like how much is coming up, you can just pull it and let some plants go, and others you can remove. But what we're doing, not just in Ontario, in the United States, and all across Canada, is that we're basically eliminating milkweed. I could drive 3 years ago and count like 50 milkweed plants along the side of the road in like a 2 mile like road trip. And now I go the same road trip and I might see one. And because the cutting's been effective and the spraying's been effective, and my question to people in general is, if it can't grow in the fields because it's toxic to vertebrates and farmers have to absolutely eliminate it, and it's no longer growing on the sides of the road, where are we going to put it so that monarchs can find it? And it's not just a question of, well, let's put it in this one space. There's a natural traveling distance that monarchs will go, and the thing that they need to be able to do is find milkweed a good distance, like over a good distance, and evenly spaced out, so that they can lay 2 eggs on one plant, the females, and then, you know, find another plant and lay 2 eggs. They lay up to 500 eggs. They try to distribute them as much as possible, because only 5 out of every 100 eggs laid make it to adult butterfly, and so the odds are already against them. And so given that, the more that we eliminate milkweed, we're going to literally eliminate the monarch butterfly from our natural habitat. So we need to create more habitat for them. That's the first thing. So our monarchs are hugely special. Monarchs live all across Texas and Florida. They live there year round. They stay there year round. They do not migrate. Our monarchs migrate from Mexico, where they overwinter, back up here, all across the eastern seaboard up to Prince Edward Island, and I'm told that they've even been sighted in Newfoundland. They're super special because they're one of the only insects that do that. They have a migratory pattern that's very similar to birds, and their evolution is, I'm going to say, insane for how they actually do it. The monarchs that return from their ancestors from Mexico, they arrived here in June, the first week of June. I started seeing them, and I looked desperately for them, and I pretty much know when they arrived back. I saw them the first week of June. My friends who watched for monarchs as well did the same. They arrive back here, they mate, and the females lay eggs. They live about 6 weeks, maybe up to 8 weeks, and they die. So the caterpillars that hatch from those eggs, from the monarchs and their ancestors that went to Mexico, let's call them 2021 Gen 1. When those caterpillars hatch, they grow to maturity, they form a chrysalis by pupating. The chrysalis matures, the butterfly comes out. Those butterflies are fully mature adults at that point in time. So 2021 Gen 1, fully mature butterflies. They mate, the females lay eggs, and they live 6, 7, at the very most 8 weeks, and they die. So those butterflies were pretty much eclosing in July. So the caterpillars were growing the first couple weeks of July, the butterflies were coming out the last 2 weeks of July, like over that time span, and then they began laying eggs. So now I'm finding eggs that are 2021 Gen 2. So the children of the grandchildren of, sorry, let me start again. The grandchildren of the Mexican migrators, ancestors. They're the same. When those butterflies come out, they're fully mature adults. They mate, the females lay eggs, they live 6, 7, 8 weeks, and they die. And they are hatching like during August, and they're maturing and becoming chrysalids by pupating and coming out as butterflies during the month of August. So the eggs that they lay are laid primarily like in September and October, And there's 3 things that happen in that month, generally speaking. And that is, number 1, the daylight hours begin to shorten. So instead of having like 14 daylight hours, now we only have like 12 and a half or 12. And, you know, it's nighttime sooner, it gets darker sooner. Another thing that happens is the difference in temperature between daytime and nighttime becomes greater. So whereas it used to be maybe 70 during the day 85 during the day and 70 overnight, now it's, you know, 80, 85 during the day, but it's going down to 60 overnight. So the difference in the temperature between day and night is getting larger. And because of those 2 things, the milkweed that grows wherever it does also starts to, you know, it gets kind of crappy quality. It starts to yellow, it curls up, like it's just not the great, you know, quality milkweed that we have in July and August. So as those 3 things are happening, the caterpillars are growing. When those caterpillars are at the 5th instar stage, when they're their largest, when they're about to pupate, a physiological change occurs in them as a result of shorter daylight hours, greater difference in temperatures, and therefore that they get the opportunity to eat. And together, this physiological change that occurs in the caterpillar results in an eventual butterfly that ecloses and is not a fully mature adult. It's, I mean, I call them young kids. Their job isn't to eat and lay eggs and, you know, produce an offspring. Their job is to fly south. And so, in my experience, and some people will say that a migrating butterfly is not really different than a non-migrating butterfly, but in my experience, the migrators that I get in September have a much broader wingspan and a narrower wingspan. Their abdomen is shorter. They're super aerodynamic. They're made to fly. And so they do not mate here. They're in a state that's called reproductive diapause. And they literally, science has proven that they are programmed to fly in the mornings with the sun on their left. And so as a result, these butterflies, the colder weather here, they take off for the south and they just keep flying until they arrive at their destination, which is in Mexico, where there are also challenges to the monarchs in that their natural habitat is being clear cut, and slowly but surely their habitat is shrinking in Mexico as well. And of course, all along the route, they need to be able to find the plants that can provide them the nectar that they need. And those butterflies live up to 8 or 9 months. And it just humbles me to think that the 2 generations that occur here in the summertime exist for the sole purpose of creating that 3rd generation that will migrate south and begin to travel back in the spring, only live 6 to 8 weeks once they are fully mature. But the eggs that they lay, butterflies they return. Somehow they know at that point in time to fly in the mornings with the sun on their right. And that's how they end up returning. So they're not the same butterflies that return that actually leave and go to Mexico, but the ones who do go to Mexico, they fly up to 4,800 kilometers. And they fly 9,000 kilometers because they don't fly in a straight line, like do all over the place. And so I have such huge respect for them. And I love the caterpillars as much, maybe more, than the butterflies. They are gentle and they are very, they're so vulnerable. Like when they molt, which they do 4 times before they pupate, they leave the plant and they go to a quiet, protected spot where they lay a silk mat and crawl onto it and then wait until their body reabsorbs most of what's in the skin that allows them to then literally like walk out of the skin. But they can be immobile in this place for a day and a half, up to 2 days. So vulnerable. They don't have defenses. They don't, their only defenses are to turtle, like they curl up and they hide. They're super cautious and they frighten very, very easily. They don't like loud noises, but they are so gentle, and they're quite funny when you watch them. And I just would love to show you what I have going on. I have a scientific collector's license that allows me to raise monarchs in an enclosure, as opposed to like not out in the wild. When I said that Ontario says that monarchs are protected, it's really just a name only, because we don't say that, you know, there's any problem cutting milkweed. We don't say that people have to grow milkweed. We don't, like, there's nothing that we physically do to help them. So with only 5 eggs making it to butterfly, the fact that I'm collecting them and bringing them in, they're standing a lot better chance with me than they are in the wild. But without my scientific collector's permit, it would be illegal for me to be doing this, which we have to find a way to help them. So you guys come on over. What I was going to say is that it all begins and ends with milkweed, and so one of the things that I've been trying to share with people is, you know, I harvest milkweed seeds every fall, and as a result, you know, I can start to grow milkweed in pots. If people don't want to put it in their gardens, they can certainly put it in pots. It'll be there and the butterflies will find it. There's 2 kinds of milkweed that I'm growing right now. One of them is the common milkweed that we see in the fields and along roadsides. This is a little bit heat-stricken, I think. And on the end is butterfly weed. It is another form of milkweed, apparently. I have a friend whose butterflies will only go to that, but mine all seem to prefer the common. So you guys can look inside, and I'll walk you through some stuff.
Here, where's a good spot for me to stand here?
Come on in, and you can. So they pupate in the worst places, and I can vouch for that. Because I will tell you that, like, you'll see, you come on to the sides, and I can like point things out to you. Maybe just swing the door a bit, because there's 3 butterflies, and I'm going to let them release them. I'm going to take my wrist guard off because it's very black and it will frighten them, the caterpillars anyway, and certainly the butterflies too. So over here, under here, that's a caterpillar that was a 5th instar that spun the silk mat and the silk button, planted his bud in it, and is hanging in a J. And literally the shape of the letter J. And after about a day, sometimes faster, I'm finding that they're eating longer and then being in a real hurry to get and find a spot to pupate. But when they do, I have videos that I'll share with you because it's just amazing. And I don't have any that are about to do that. But I have, like when I was saying that they will always find like a really weird spot to pupate, you know? Like I have them on the edges of flower pots, I have them, yeah, and sometimes they will pupate in a place that's really not very safe. And when that happens, I have a method where I can take them down and like secure the silk still to the cremaster, which is the black stem that you see. What they've done, there's a silk mat that goes about an inch all around that they spend about 3 hours laying, and then they create this raised silk button in the center. And when the butterfly is ready, caterpillar is ready, he'll turn around and she will put their back 2 legs in that silk button and make sure that it sticks. And you see them like, they turn around and then they like try and find it with their back legs because they're blind to where it is. When they eventually find it, They make sure they stick themselves well into it. Little by little, they let their front end drop off until they're literally hanging by their back legs. And usually within about 24 hours, they will start the process to pupate. And because I've seen it so often, I can tell exactly when it's going to happen. And it never gets old. It's just spellbinding. And then when they get to the point that they're ready to eclose, the chrysalis begins to darken. One thing that I can share with you, I just have to find one, is that the chrysalids they look like they're green here, but then when the butterfly is ready to eclose, it turns black and you can literally see the butterfly inside of it. And the reason is because the chrysalis is actually green, it's transparent. And the caterpillar inside is made of nothing but milkweed, so it's green. And when the caterpillar makes the chrysalis by pupating, inside the membrane of the chrysalis, it's just like a green slushy. And in that slushy, there are antenna cells and leg cells and eye cells and wing cells, and literally the cells group together and go to where they need to be, and over time you start to be able to see the butterfly start to mature inside the chrysalis. And again, because I've seen so many, when it starts to come out, it's spellbinding. It never ever gets old. But I can pretty much judge when it's going to happen. People always ask what the gold dots are. Number one, it makes it look like a jewel. But the ones down here are pretty much air vents, is what I'm told. Again, I'm not an expert. I have no scientific degree in monarch butterflies or larvae, but one thing that I do know is that when the butterfly ecloses from the chrysalis, it actually will split. You can see between the gold dots here and on the other side, there's like a V. And then it splits again on these curves up to the gold line that's lateral there. And the butterfly literally just drops right out, but they will hang on with their feet to those gold dots. They're like secure footing for them as well. And when I can show you more videos as well, when they come out of the chrysalis, their wings are all curled up, and the butterfly drops down and hangs on, and it's got this huge abdomen. And the abdomen is filled with fluid, and the butterfly pumps that fluid to the wings, and it literally fills up the wings and makes them straight. And then as they dry, they stiffen, and they get to be that, that fluttery stiff, like it actually hits stuff and it sounds like paper on paper. It's quite stiff. But and then when it's done putting all of the fluid necessary into the wings, it excretes meconium, which is the first stool of the butterfly, and it's red. Don't know why, but I can always tell when I'll come in and I'll see like red spots on the floor, and I'll be like, okay, so I know I have a new butterfly from this one, and I can track which one came out, not just by the empty chrysalis, but from where I can find the meconium on the ground. But I have like 80 chrysalids in here right now. Doesn't look like that many, but they're under every shelf. They're under this shelf. I have 3, 1, 2, 3, and I have these guys over here, which I was getting rid of old milkweed, and I found this chrysalis on this leaf, but there was a guy hanging in a J here. And the worst thing you can do is interrupt them when either they're molting or when they're in a J preparing to pupate. So I just found, they don't need to eat any longer, so I could just stick it in a container and stick it in a corner. But when these two are good and hard, it takes about 2 to 3 days for the chrysalis membrane to really harden, then what I do is take a damp Q-tip and remove the silk and pull it off by the silk button, and I'll get this big mass of wet silk, tie some dental floss around it, thread it with an upholsterer's needle and feed it through the screen and put it up where it can safely mature, you know, safe from rain, safe from wind, and just let them do their thing. So yeah, it's quite exciting. So I have some infants. I used to have different potted milkweed, and I would teasingly say that, you know, one was daycare and another one was kindergarten, and then there was elementary school, and then there was high school, because as they grew, I would very cautiously move them from pot to pot. The reason I do that is because they're all interested in the same food, and the big guys can be kind of relentless sometimes about eating the leaf they want to eat. And so having them separated that way allowed me to also track how they were doing. They grew much better on the plants than in containers. Like in this container, I have pieces of milkweed with 2 eggs on them. I don't know if you can see them. There's a little tiny, tiny white egg on that piece of leaf. So when I find an egg on a roadside or whatever, I punch it out with a single hole punch, put it on a fresh piece of milkweed, and then every day I'll put fresh milkweed under the egg, so that whenever it takes 3 to 4 days for the egg to hatch, whenever it does hatch, the caterpillar has access to fresh milkweed. I do that because, you know, I can't just put the leaf in here. It'll curl up and die, and then the caterpillar will hatch. I'll never find it. And also, I don't want them to get, sometimes the caterpillars will eat the eggs, because the first thing that a hatchling does is eat its own egg and then move on to the milkweed. So, you know, other young caterpillars come across an egg and they're like, ooh, guess I didn't finish mine, and off they go, and next thing you know, there's not going to be a caterpillar coming out of that egg anymore. So I do separate them and keep the ones that I bring from the roadsides. You know, if I find cuttings like this that have eggs on them, I tend to not disturb them. And certainly if I find eggs on my own plants, which we've found a ton, I just make sure that I bring the potted plant in and let them do their thing here. But literally, they are so tiny, and many people cannot even see them. But I'm going to see if I can find one thing here. I put about 25 in here the day before yesterday, so you won't even see a hatchling, but you will see a really tiny one, I believe. And because it's day 3, chances are they're going to be molting soon, so it won't want to disturb them anyway. Monarchs have a ton of predators, and that's one of the reasons that I do this on the scale that I do. Wasps will eat the caterpillars, as will beetles, stink bugs. Nope, that's a skin from a molt. Let me see which guys all go. I'm just going to keep looking through here. Wasps, I said wasps, ants, beetles. Okay, so this guy is like 4 days old. And that's how tiny he is. And that's like 4 to 5 days old. And he is either just finished molting. He has a particularly black face. Every time that they molt, their skin detaches like right in front of their antennas, and they crawl out of it, but they have a nose cap that has to pop off, and it looks like the Mercedes logo, like a little steering wheel. And I often find them on the floor, and I'll be like, oh, you know, little ones, big ones, and it'll be like, oh, somebody just molted successfully, which is great. So, you know, birds can't really eat them, but that doesn't prevent them from trying But the one thing, because I just put that leaf back onto another leaf where it won't blow off, so he'll migrate back to the leaf that he was on. One thing I think is really cool is, I'm going to pass this out to you, just hold it against your skin, and it's always cold. Like it's really, it's amazing, it's cold, like it's cool, and it just, you know, for me it's interesting that the temperature of the chrysalis is cool. But here, like I'll pass this out somehow. I also have some butterflies that you can just take the leaf and just like have it touch the back of your skin. You haven't used bug spray, right?
No.
Okay. I just want to make sure because they're so sensitive. One of the women that I communicate with regularly in a Monarch Facebook group, she lost all of her caterpillars one day, and she couldn't figure out why. And people said, like, did your neighbor spray property and did it drift onto your milkweed? And she said, no, like I have them in a habitat, and I was like cleaning the habitat, and so I had taken out the milkweed, and some of them I had to move around, and literally a dozen people were saying, is it this, is it that, going through the options of what might have happened to them, because when she came upon them, they were all dead in the bottom of the habitat. And finally someone happened to say, did you give your dog, do you have a dog? Yes. Did you give your dog a flea and tick treatment? And by any chance, did you pet your dog before you touched the caterpillars? And that's all it takes. They're so vulnerable, they're so susceptible. My dream is that we get to a point where there's enough good quality, safe milkweed available for them, because the butterflies are truly so special and gentle, and I don't have long with the butterflies. When they come out of the chrysalis, when they close, it takes them a few hours to dry their wings and to find their legs. And then they will start to walk around, and eventually they start to flap their wings. You can tell the males from the females because the males have a spot on their wing that the females don't have. It'll probably be easier to reference pictures instead of trying to show you on a live butterfly, because they're not reliable. This is a male here, but I don't know that you can actually see. I don't think he'll open his wings quite yet. But yeah, the line that's closest to the abdomen or second closest to the abdomen has like an oval black spot on it, and it's the oval black spot that identifies the male from the females. But I don't think it's going to rain because it's only windy and gray skies, and I usually let them go the afternoon that they come out. They need to learn how to fly defensively. They also have to learn how to gauge the air currents and the wind before they can truly become really good flyers. There was one down here, but I think he's gone. Should be ready. Only one fly. So they're hardier than you think. They are so strong. They will always walk forward, so literally if you can keep their wings from flapping and just, you know, or not. This one's super anxious to go. One of the really interesting things that I've learned from them is that, go eat something. There you go. Yeah. It may, so their proboscis, yeah, it's eating. That's really cool. So their proboscis curls up underneath their chin, if they have a chin, and they drop it down and uncurl it, and they poke it into the blossoms of flowers to actually access the nectar. So this one is fully enjoying the nectar and sticking that proboscis deep into the flower. When they come out of the chrysalis, it's actually in two pieces. And they have these elbowy things that are called labial palps on either side of their their like where the proboscis is on either side, and they literally tap 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 as they uncurl and curl the proboscis, and they tap it together. It's not actually a straw, but there's like a sponge at the end of it, and so they absorb the nectar, and then it migrates through the proboscis into their systems. And the one thing I always find really cool is that when I first put them on a flower to be able to nectar, the next time I go to, pick up the butterfly, they'll drop their proboscis. It's like they associate my hand with food, which I think is really cool. It's like, that's good for me. So one of the things my husband and I do here on our property is we don't really garden for aesthetics. We garden for the ecosystem and for pollinators, in that we have tried to make sure that not more than 50% of our property is in grass, which absolutely does nothing for other than the dandelions that also grow in our grass. But grass, if you can keep the grass of your property down to 50% and then let the other 50% be wildflowers or woods or trees or other things that definitely support our pollinators and our ecosystem. Like, there's nothing better than a dead tree log for bees and beetles and other insects that lay eggs and then secure them inside a log or something like that. And as much as people say, oh, something's eating my plant, I love it when I see things eating the plant, because when your ecosystem is in balance, then your plant can actually feed the larvae and the insects that you have and withstand that. When our ecosystem is in balance, it basically can survive each other and sustain each other and still be sustained themselves, whatever the food source is. And one of the things that we can point to as a result of that, the emerald ash borer didn't originate here. It came here from another country. And not only do our ash trees not have any defenses against it, but there are no known predators for the emerald ash borer here in Canada. It's going to take 20, 30 years until there's a natural predator for the ash borer. So until there's a predator, we're going to suffer the result of having that insect here in Canada. And when you have the emerald ash borer and you have ash trees, it's not in balance because there's nothing to protect the ash trees from it. And so what we hope to do is eliminate the species that are not native to our area, not just insects, but plants. Because the plants that are native to our area support our native insects, birds, species, everything else. And so, we've been on this property for 5 years, and it takes time to grow things and evolve to the point where everything can exist in harmony. But, and I'm always learning. If I could recommend one book, Protecting Pollinators by Jodi Helmer is an amazing resource. It's scientific. She quotes studies from both the US and Canada, experts in their fields, different groups that are doing all kinds of studies to determine the impacts on pollinators of different aspects of our culture. And my goal is to just keep learning and keep supporting monarchs, because science estimates that they'll be gone by 2060, our migrators. Not in my lifetime, but in yours, and certainly our kids and our grandkids. And basically, it's the elimination of their habitat and also the impacts of climate change and other things as well. So, does anybody have any questions?
Could you repeat the book title and author, please?
Absolutely. The book is called Protecting Pollinators, and I actually listen to it on Audible. I'm not a sit down and read a page by page book anymore, because I'm always doing things either with our gardens or with butterflies. Protecting Pollinators by Jodi Helmer, Jodi Helmer. Super fascinating information. The first time I ever learned why climate change impacts the way it does on certain species that rely on certain plants. And if I have a minute, I'll just throw that out there. Because some plants' cycle is based on, say, temperature. And the insects that feed on that plant may be based on daylight hours. And once upon a time, everything was in balance. But with climate change, if the insects or the plant, one or the other, say the plant relies on daylight hours, there was an incident of a specific plant somewhere in the southern US that had actually gone through its entire cycle before the insect arrived back to feed on it. And the plant was no longer a viable food source because it had finished its cycle, and the insects were based on daylight hours. So when the two get out of balance, if the host isn't viable any longer, you know, that's one of the differences which I didn't understand. I thought like everything is in sync all the time, but they're not. So
Yeah. Perhaps do you think we could potentially go under the tent to keep answering questions, just so, because it's currently raining here now?
yeah,
100%.
I can't release the butterflies in the rain either.
Okay.
Because we don't do well in the rain.
Is it good if I just show them show the stream a little bit more of this?
Of course.
Cool.
And actually the caterpillars, the big guys that are on the milkweed, but like look at this guy. Like
Yeah, I need the gold, is
yes, the
incredible.
gold is incredible. I want like a pendant. But you know, anyone that like you're welcome to really see up close up. The key is not to assume, like always assume that there's a caterpillar or a chrysalis or something right where you're playing and over your foot, because there wasn't something. So right now it's, you know, I'll move a stool and forget that there's a chrysalis underneath it, or I happen to pick it up. It's a problem for what happens to be there, but and they're great at becoming hidden. Yeah, it's getting really weird. Look at it. So the reason I filled the habitat full of flowers is exactly for days like this with the rain. I can't release them, but they're going to be hungry, and so the butterflies can just migrate down to the flowers that you know they're attracted to, and put the variety in there so that they can actually have something to eat and be strong when they eventually are released. But when possible, I release them as well. A leaf with an egg on it to show you. This is the egg right here. Sorry for my dirty fingernail. Oops. Sorry. And for those of you that are here, if you look at it really closely, and you can look at it. The top of the egg is shaped like a football, like a dome. And if you look really closely, you can see little striations from the tip of the egg down.
We have another question, Christina.
Sure.
So someone has said, could you leave your information in case other people raising butterflies would like to connect with you?
Absolutely. So I have an Instagram page, which is Monarch, and I put up a lot of videos and things like that there so that you can kind of see my journey. And I also am one of the leaders of the Butterfly Project here in Stormont, Glendass, and Glengarry, and so there are a lot of posts on that as well. You're welcome to join the Butterfly Project. I think it's SDNG Butterfly Project. My email is Christina ENR, so it's CHR days where, you know, a caterpillar pupated and butterflies came out, and kids will never forget that. And in my view, it's the grandchildren of my age group that are the land stewards of the future, and experiences like seeing the vulnerability of this particular species and knowing that we may not have them forever is something that they likely won't forget. And I think that the more in touch that kids can be with nature, the better, you know, land stewards, and at least they'll be, you know, maybe thoughtful and you know, make decisions that are considerate, basically, of things other than, you know, just their own interests. Things like that.
Nice.
Want to close it up?
Yeah, sure. All right, so just for the online stream, we'll just say goodbye now if there's no more questions rolling in. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We will also be, if it's all right with you, Christina, we'll write down the contact information in the comment sections just so that it's available, your Instagram as well as potentially your email account. And,
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
fantastic. So thanks so much everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.